Did Marvel Comics fire Star Wars writer Chuck Wendig for being anti-Trump? No, but he did get fired. So let's briefly go into why. In the world of more recent history, there's certainly there's a long running, maybe not long running. There's a strong running thread right now about creators, editors, people who work in comic companies who have personal Twitter accounts and post things that seem a little bit dodgy. That they're either very hostile to one political party or the other, usually just the one, or they just kind of go off at fans who are angry with them. But in the world of high polarization with comics, it's easy for people to get a foul from each other. And the comic industry in general, and I've done other videos certainly on this topic, tends to be more left-leaning. It's a creative industry, so that's not 100% comment. Whenever I say something like that, I always get people say, "Well, what about this guy and this guy? What about Chuck Dixon? What about?" And yes, there are many different politics, many different people in comics, but generally speaking, creative industries, movies, books, writing, comics tend to lean more left. It's for whatever reason, that's how it typically goes. And maybe that's has something to do with a lot of the creators live in kind of metropolitan areas that tend to be blue states or left-leaning cities, and it's just how it happens to be. And they're probably, you could go on and on and on, and maybe that's a video someday. Why do more creators lean left than right? But from my perspective, it doesn't really pay to get all wrapped up in that. Why they are who they are is really their business, and trying to psychoanalyze that is exhausting on any given day. So what has happened, or what happened, and there was a bunch of there were a bunch of activity going on Twitter, where after Donald Trump won the election, which surprised a lot of people, there were a lot of very public kind of "oh no" statements from people within comics, and then even some kind of angry ones like "we'll remember everyone who voted for Trump," which sounded like a veiled threat of some kind. What did that mean exactly? No one's really ever come out and say, well, what it meant was, we're not going to invite you to brunch anymore. We're still going to give you work, but you're not going to be able to come and have eggs with us. I don't know. But there were definitely, and then there was other kind of creators who get very, very angry, who would say things like, if you're a Trump supporter, don't buy my book, or, various obscenities, kind of things that would cause the advertisers, not to fund this video. Although I don't really care about that. I need to test this out and see what, if I just get kind of demonetized, is that it? I mean, I don't really care. But I don't want them to start, I don't have to answer emails. That's sorry. I don't care about the money, but I don't want to answer emails from YouTube. Anyway, so I need to test the limits to this. This won't be the video to do that, though. So as time has gone by, there's been, and then the whole Comicsgate thing kind of arose from a lot of people who were pointing out, people like Doug Ernst in the early days who are saying, hey, this creator behavior on social media is outrageous, and they're behaving in such a way that is very unprofessional, and as fans, we don't like being screamed at or yelled at or told we can't buy comics. It's ridiculous. Kind of as a check and balance to that. And then certainly, the Comicsgate and all the rest kind of evolved from there. But the basic premise of what a lot of the kind of very early people did was say, hey, here are these high-profile creators. They work for big companies. They're sponsored by those companies. They get their Twitter handles in books. And Marvel quietly kind of stopped doing a lot of that. And they're saying things that are really offensive to, half of the country, or 42.9, whatever it is. Anyway, we don't like it. And I've done videos on this as well. That's I think it's self-defeating to go after your fans, whatever their political persuasion happens to be, because you're in effect cutting out some of your audience. You need that audience for your company and for yourself. I think it's a bad idea. But generally speaking, despite a lot of objections from people on Twitter and Comicsgate or other groups, it didn't really stop anything. Creators continued to do this and do this and do this. So Chuck Wendig is a writer of books, and he had written several. He'd worked with Disney on Star Wars novels, and I think he continues to write some Star Wars novels, although maybe that's changed. But anyway, Chuck Wendig decides to get on to Twitter and really kind of go nuts on Trump supporters, and less about Trump, but more about kind of the people who like Trump. And he in particular really kind of aimed at people. And he said, quote unquote, "Winter is coming, you callous fucknuts, you prolapsed assholes, you grotesque monsters, you racists and rapists and wretched abusers, you vengeful petty horrors." And he kind of goes on and on and on in this long thread, where he really, it's not just they can eat shit, all of them. They can eat a boot covered in shit. Someone will tell you to be civil because our rage and scorn will fuel the other side, but F that double standard in both its ears. So he just, I mean, it's very, I don't know if he was drinking at the time. I don't know. Who knows? But then, a short time later, he writes, "Today I got the call, I'm fired. Because of the negativity and vulgarity that my tweets bring. Seriously, that's what Mark, the editor, said. It was too much politics, too much vulgarity, too much negativity on my part. Basically because I was not civil." Which, of course, their decision to make. I'm not their boss. And turns out they're not the boss of me either. Ha, ha, ha. So he goes on, he blocks a ton of people. A lot of people celebrate the fact that he was fired, and all good. But going back to his first statement, it was too much politics, too much vulgarity, too much negativity on my part. It's clearly not too much politics, because lots of Marvel creators do politics all over the place, continue to do politics all over the place, and it doesn't really impact anything. The too much vulgarity, yeah, probably. Although it was really probably much the vulgarity aimed specifically at people. I think there's a difference between saying F this, F that, and saying F you and F you and F you. I think there's a big difference between those two. And Chuck Wendig definitely got on the other side of that horse. And too much negativity on my part, I mean, I don't know. Most of comic creators in general are negative all over the place. So I don't know if that particular is. But it was a definite sign to creators. And so a bunch of creators, by the way, come in, they're horrified. They're saying, oh, if a editor or somebody, our company, can just remove us from projects because of our personal tweets, then this is censorship. This is terrible. And the answer there is, it's not censorship. You're working for someone else. I mean, even Wendig identifies it himself. They're the boss. You're free to work where you want. They're free to hire who they want to work on books. And I think that most sane people can recognize the difference between going in and saying, I hate Trump, I really don't like Trump. Put it this way. Alana Smith writing, "We will remember who voted for Trump," or whatever she did. Or Heather Antos writing some of the things she wrote about, being frustrated, angry with Trump and so on. That's not going to get you fired, because you're making a statement. It sounds, you say, wait a minute, you're going to remember who voted for Trump? Even though that sounds very ominous, and it may be very ominous. Who knows if she's keeping a list at her desk and, won't vote for Trump. I don't know. But it sounded that way. But it still is not a direct targeted attack. And here's where a lot of people have a lot of emotional gut reactions probably to what I'm just saying. But I ask you to just take a second, sit back for a moment, and just contemplate the difference between somebody saying, hey, we're going to remember people who voted for Trump, and somebody saying, they can eat shit, all of them. They can eat a boot covered in shit. That there is a difference between those two. Now, you could say, it's not much of a difference. They're both ominous or both bad. That's cool. It's your decision to make where you draw the line ethically. I'm saying, and by the way, my own personal opinion, I think both are unacceptable. I think when you have a company and you've got certainly a public facing company, you're doing this, I think it's not acceptable to be doing things like this. I think that you do need to have good PR. You do need to have good customer engagement. But there are two different worlds there. One is direct, on the surface, can be screenshotted, and was, by a bunch of news agencies. A lot of people, this story got picked up, which, by the way, is also why he got fired. It's because he got attention. If nobody had paid attention, if it didn't get any news articles, then people just would have ignored it and would have gone on. Again, lots of creators do and say crazy things. And it just flies under the radar because nobody cares. But if you get publicity, if you get press around you being a crazy person, then, it's going to cost you your job. So when I look at this, I say, should he have lost his job? Yeah, in my opinion, yeah, probably. I think if you're creating a product on someone else's behalf, i.e., you're writing Star Wars for, in this case, Disney, Marvel, and so you're a name being brought in to take one of their properties and sell it to others, then you can't at the same time give the finger to a bunch of the audience. Disney did not have a statement saying we don't want to sell to Trump people. Maybe some people inside the company believe that, but that's certainly not how they're marketing that book. And if people do believe that at the top, they're definitely keeping that a secret as much as they can because they want that money. So if you have a creator that comes out and then just states it, outright, or kind of these creators who said, if you're a Trump fan, we don't want your money, get out of here. Yeah, that's going to put you on the wrong end with editorial and the bosses, 9 times out of 10. You may have to do a lot to get there because chances are editorial and your bosses feel the same way politically you do. But if you create enough noise, if you create enough attention, bad attention for that company, then yeah, they're going to be forced to get rid of you or push you out. And so, and people know this. It's why a lot of kind of watchdogs for this kind of behavior try and signal boost and amplify crazy tweets as fast and as aggressively as they can because they're trying to get that attention up so people will take notice. They'll be forced to take notice. It's tough. Some people, I guess I'd cap this by saying, why did it happen so quickly for Chuck Wendig versus other people? Why did it take so long? Why do some creators, Dan Slott says crazy things. Why is he still employed by Marvel? Well, I mean, the short answer is, it's kind of that difference I just made with Alana Smith's tweet versus Chuck Wendig's tweet. There is a subtle difference there of being really openly, angrily hostile, almost wishing for death on people or wishing for injury, wishing for, some rage kind of thing. And who knows, Chuck Wendig was drinking. I mean, he had to be during this. I'm sure if in a moment of humility, he would probably recognize where he went wrong. If you tip over that line, then it's going to happen pretty quick for you. And if you get public attention, if it gets a lot of press, it's going to tip over for you. I get in a lot of arguments about, should Chuck Wendig be fired or not because he was anti-Trump? And I would argue that's the wrong argument. That's the wrong conversation to have. He should have gotten fired because he did something that brought a lot of negative publicity and in theory, cost sales. That's why he got fired. I mean, the problem you have here is that, the audience for these comic books is not huge. And if you're going to go out there and you're going to isolate big parts of the audience in a really obvious way, many people will comment that some of these other creators will say things that isolate audiences, but here there's no doubt. I mean, when Chuck Wendig is telling people to, die and they can, eat a boot covered in shit and this kind of stuff, you can't look at that and go, well, I'm not sure what he really means here. It's clear what he really means. And so you can't just, knock off part of the audience. You also, for something like Star Wars, which has a bunch of other, comics and rides and movies and media and everything else, you can't have these super aggressive statements. Some people say, well, wait a minute, how is that different from Kathleen Kennedy saying the Force is female and some of these other, Ryan Johnson saying it was Trump supporter trolls who hated his movie? Well, first of all, Ryan Johnson made those comments after the movie came out. So that put it this way, the damage had been done. Disney couldn't go back and erase what he had done. You do notice that Disney did not, has been very suspect about if Ryan Johnson's doing more Star Wars movies. It's not a sure thing. They're definitely waiting for that to calm down. If it calms down, maybe they work with him again. If they like him, who knows? And then Kathleen Kennedy's comments, the Force is female, even though that irritates people, and there's been tons of videos on it, it still is not it's not a statement that gathers headlines as a direct assault against people. You might say, well, as a man, that's assaulting me. Well, but not again. I point back to Chuck Wendig's tweet. They can eat a boot covered in shit. That's a lot more clear of an insult than what Kennedy is doing. Now, again, you may say, half dozen of one or the other. It's all going to be how you interpret it and how it resonates with you, and only you get to decide that. That's your choice. But the key here is, as a company, if you see things that are very clearly outrageous, very clearly problematic, then it makes it easy to step in and do something. And so that's what was done. So was he fired for tweets? Absolutely. These tweets, we do know it. Will he get more work at Marvel? I don't know. I mean, if he gets a bigger name and he starts to do other projects and other books, and the controversy's kind of worn down, and Disney believes that, things won't happen. Maybe Joe Biden gets elected president, and in celebration they give Chuck Wendig the Star Wars book. Who knows? If they think they can make money off of it, I'm sure they would. But right now they did a simple business calculation of, is this guy's noise, greater than, less than the amount of money we're going to make? And they decided the money was less. And so he was fired. The end. Anyway, simple as that. Maybe there's some other feelings to this. Why don't you leave a comment below? Let me know your other thoughts on it. This whole topic of what can be said and where is super tricky to dive into. It absolutely is. And everybody has a different line. I think the one thing I'd ask everybody to do is just recognize your line, your view on all this is your own. You get to own it. No one can take that away from you. But it's also just yours. Everybody's going to have a different way of looking at this, and that's just the way the ball bounces. Whether you love Trump, hate Trump, it's your decision to make, and all we can do is just try and figure out how to engage with each other in the best way possible. Not like these tweets. I think that anyone hopefully can agree that the way Chuck Wendig decided to engage with portions of his audience was not the way that is productive in engaging with that audience. Even big friends, supporters of him, I think, would look at that and go, yeah, it's probably not the way to talk to any part of your fan base, even if you thoroughly despise them. But, and by the way, I should say at this point, some have come in and said, oh, they weren't talking about the fans. They were talking about, Trump and McConnell and Ryan, Grassley, Collins, the Republicans, that they were talking about them. And that is how his thread started, talking about them. But it became unclear. So if he meant it to be just those people, and certainly not Republicans in general or not other fans, if that's what he meant, then as a writer, he failed, because it did not come across that way. It did not come across as I'm just talking about these bigger names. I'm giving commentary to Trump. I'm not talking about the Republicans or the GOP. I mean, he says fuck all the GOP. So I mean, maybe he meant just a couple people. It's not how he came across. So you failed in that message. And unfortunately, lesson learned. Leave a comment below if you have some other thoughts on this. Hey, like, subscribe, introduce to a friend. I try and do the most even-handed analysis I can. In this case, I tell you my opinion, but you're also welcome to yours, of course. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.